Millions of people worldwide are trapped in modern slavery. That's according to a new report. The Global Slavery Index says over 40 million people are considered to be living in modern slavery, with North Korea, Eritrea, and Burundi having the highest rates. More than 70% are women, and over 15 million are forced into marriage, while nearly 25 million people are working in forced labor. For more on all this, I want to bring in Davina Durgana. She is one of the co-authors of the Global Slavery Index. She's also a senior statistician with the Walk Free Foundation, a human rights group. Davina, thank you for joining us. This is such a disturbing report. Can you start out by telling us exactly what modern slavery is, what falls under this category?
Absolutely, and thank you, Tanya, for having me. So modern slavery, we really follow a blanket definition that's modeled after the Palermo Protocol. It's a UN standard for modern slavery. And effectively, you can think of modern slavery, as we've defined it, as a situation where someone is unable to leave a situation of work. And that can include sexual labor, that can include construction, it can include agriculture, it can include any industry you can think of. And we also include an estimate for forced marriage.
So, Davina, let's look at North Korea for one. Those figures are extremely alarming. 1 in 10 people are considered modern slaves. Why is that, and how do you get information like that out of North Korea?
Absolutely. So, as you might know, we've actually partnered on the global estimates of modern slavery last September with the International Labor Organization, and this was kind of the starting point for our Global Slavery Index for 2018. Effectively, we came up with regional totals, and we used a lot of different data sources, and that included information that was UN held about allegations of state-imposed forced labor. So for North Korea, we specifically have learned for a long time about the situation in a lot of the labor camps there, and specifically what the reality on the ground would be. At our launch at the UN headquarters in New York on July 19th, we were actually really honored to have Yeonmi Park, one of the a North Korean defector, speak about the importance of this type of research. And we've also have a supplemental report available on our website, globalslaveryindex.org, that we've done in partnership with other research groups looking at the North Korean situation specifically, and that includes over 50 interviews with defectors.
And so in North Korea, what you're seeing mostly is labor, is it physical labor? Is that what the slaves are being forced to do?
Yeah, we call it state-imposed forced labor, and you actually see something very similar in Eritrea. So in North Korea, political dissidents, basically many infractions can lead to terms of labor sentencing in hard labor camps. In Eritrea, for example, which is also in the top 10, you're seeing conscripts that are forced to work in the military being held for multi-year contracts and being unable to leave that work. So we call it state-imposed forced labor because the government or the national infrastructure is responsible for imposing those forced labor conditions.
So Eritrea is finding itself at the center of this with, I think your report said, 9 million people living under those conditions. What is fueling this phenomenon of modern slavery across the continent of Africa?
Sure. So one of the issues that we see is not just state-imposed forced labor, but we're also seeing a comorbidity with conflict. So of the top 10 countries we have for highest prevalence rates, 7 of those countries have situations of severe conflict that have actually been the subject of recent UN Security Council resolutions. And so of the top 10, you have 7 countries. And aside from North Korea, Eritrea, and Burundi, that includes Central African Republic and South Sudan, Iran, and Afghanistan, that are all affected by conflict, and specifically those resolutions. So we're really seeing a coincidence of both states and governments that are either complicit in modern slavery, like in Eritrea, Burundi, and North Korea, or are affected by conflict and unable to intervene, and therefore leading to higher rates of modern slavery because of this conflict that may be limiting the state's ability to act.
Now, this could be a surprise to many people listening right now, but the U.S. and other developed countries also come up in your report. What is America's role in all of this?
Absolutely. So this year we really wanted to look as well at developed countries and the culpability that we have. So the United States in particular has a fantastic government response. We've had lots of policies in place, lots of government agencies that are doing great work to fight modern slavery in the U.S. and internationally. However, really no government effort can be perfect. No government has a perfect response. And one of the things that we are seeing for all developed countries is that migration policies and other recent issues related to border security, not just in the United States, but also throughout Europe, are really increasing the vulnerability of migrants and others that could then be subjected to modern slavery and other abuses. So aside from just a lot of the geopolitical issues that are happening around developed countries like the United States and Western Europe, you're also seeing complicity in terms of consumer goods. So one of the interesting things is that the United States does do a great job of supply chain transparency laws. That means that companies and governments' contracts are really held to a high standard in terms of trying to make sure that there's no modern slavery in their supply chains. However, every country in the world can improve that. And what you're looking at in terms of consumer goods, you'll also notice that we have some information in this year's report related to the G20 countries and the amount of at-risk products made with forced labor that are actually imported by each of those countries.
Is that why we should always look for the free trade label? I mean, is that what it refers to when we're buying a bar of chocolate, for instance?
Well, so free trade, fair trade, a lot of that will help. It'll mean that there's a lot of regulation, there's a lot of oversight in those supply chains. What we really need are consumers that are actually asking those questions.
Right.
So it's not just, these fair trade or free trade operations, which are fantastic and amazing. What we're also looking for is for consumers to ask those same questions of their favorite brands and to try to get, more emphasis of human rights concerns and human trafficking, supply chain transparency on the part of those companies.
Remind us of the categories again that we need to be particularly cognizant of when we're buying products. Garments, right? Chocolate.
Oh, yes, of course. So
what's the category?
So cocoa is a big one. Fishing industry, so fishing products are another major at-risk industry. Apparel is often an at-risk industry. The United States also tends to import electronics is another big one. There's several categories that we can look at that really emphasize the amount of imports we have from at-risk countries that use forced labor in the production of these goods.
Davina Durgana, thank you so much for bringing our attention to this very, very important international issue.
Thank you so much for having us, Tanya.